Hello and welcome to the Danger Dungeon Encounter Podcast. I'm your host, the Lanky Paladin, Dungeon Master Chase. It's a familiar story to many of us gamers born in the 80s. Your parents see something on TV or heard something about demonic influences, and the next thing you know, you're not allowed to play tabletop role-playing games, especially Dungeons & Dragons. My guest today had a more extreme version of that growing up, and came out the other side running her own business, selling dice online, and understanding the market for curated and rare dice. A set of her dice recently went for $300. Adrianne Skelton of Touchstone Dice, thank you so much for being on the show.
Oh, thank you for having me. I love these first-time things, and this is definitely a first time for me.
How long have you been in the dice business, slinging dice, if you will?
Less than 2 months.
Less than 2 months. So we're getting you on the cusp of your new business venture, but that's exciting. But you do know a lot of stuff about dice, though, so you're a knowledgeable source, and I'm glad to have you on here. And just already seeing what you're doing with your business and stuff like that, it's really, really impressive.
Yeah, I'm launching my web store on Friday.
Very nice. Well, let's start at the beginning, because you have kind of an interesting pathway into nerd culture. So you kind of had a interesting childhood. Like I said at the beginning of the show, a lot of people grow up with conservative parents that wouldn't let them kind of play certain games or do certain things, but you kind of had a little bit more extreme version of that. So what was your life like growing up in rural Granbury, Texas?
Well, I was a big nerd from the beginning, big reader, such a bookworm, and I was also an artist, but I was born into a very conservative, quote-unquote Christian community / church / cult. It was all, it was like everybody was my family. Many of them were my family, but trying to be who I was in that environment did not work very well at all. So I spent a lot of time trying to find time for the things that I love to do, and sort of on the sly, in between the Wednesday night going to meeting, Sunday going to meeting. Sunday was all day, hours and hours of preaching, and then Friday night sings. Everybody go to Friday night, and your entire life was revolved around this church community, and everything you did had to tie back to it.
Did that church community, do they have a name? Were you comfortable sharing that?
They didn't, actually, so it makes it kind of difficult. One of their things was that they were the Christians, the chosen people, so they didn't have a name. That's just what they were. We called it the Assembly, and it's weird because in my adult life I've come across online on YouTube and then just actually even talking to other people that they also had a church called the Assembly, but it wasn't any way related to mine. It's very similar, but nothing beyond that. I think it's just because that term comes from the Bible, and so different people would coin it.
What was your family like?
I had a pretty big family. Both my mom and dad come from families of 7 kids each, and so I had a lot of cousins, and all of this family, like literally all of this family, extended family, were a part of this conservative church. And so I had conservative parents. I had a conservative community that was like half my family and the other half not related to me. It was like living on an island, and I had no idea I was on an island until I started getting into high school.
Yeah. So when you were like a kid, were you allowed to watch TV or see Disney movies, anything like that?
We weren't supposed to. And I'm lucky because my parents weren't like super committed to this whole thing. And so we went through a couple of TVs when I was a kid. My dad would buy one, and then after 6 months or so, he would feel too guilty and he would get rid of it. And so I did get to watch movies growing up, a lot of Disney for sure. Though things like the Little Mermaid, that was absolutely not allowed. She wasn't wearing enough clothes. And but TV, no, we never had a TV. So all those TV shows, all that pop culture in that area, and music, secular music as well, I completely missed out on. It's like a big blank in my way of relating to my peers and everything.
Do you ever feel like you've missed out on like large areas of pop culture that you just have no knowledge about because of your upbringing?
I know I have like I know there's huge gaps, especially when it comes to TV that I just have, and like popular music that I have no idea what people are talking about. I don't really feel like I miss out, except whenever my husband makes a reference that I don't get. I always wish that I could kind of be that for him in some of those areas, but we've made up for it in others. So.
Well, we hear stories about like people like outside the Berlin Wall, like wanting to like have Western culture, and that was like the reason why the Berlin Wall fell, and people wanted to escape that. You know, it's based off our amazing pop culture. We have Bruce Springsteen, we have Steven Spielberg movies and stuff like that. Did you ever like get influenced by that culture and be like, man, I really like this. I want to go see that. That is cool. That is something I want to be a part of. Was that your story at all?
I can remember just being desperate to watch Lord of the Rings. Those movies came out whenever I was in my late teens, I think. I don't know, it might have been my early 20s, but I remember that was like the first time that I could drive by then. I didn't get my license until I was quite a bit older. I was like 18, I think. I was terrified, but I went to a Blockbuster and I rented the movies. I was so afraid somebody was going to see me the whole time. But yeah, I took them back home and I watched them. Around that time, I started doing a lot of PC gaming as well. The internet and video games is all kind of a new thing in this culture, and so it was kind of an unknown, and I was able to kind of slip under the radar, and I started playing things like the Elder Scrolls, and then I also started playing eventually quite a bit later. I bought my own Xbox and started playing like Assassin's Creed, and Skyrim was a big one. There's a funny story about that. I don't know if you want to hear it.
No, I do want to hear it. What's your funny story?
So by that time, when Skyrim came out, I was in my mid 20s. I had a job and everything. You know, they allowed all this because, you know, by they I mean the church, not necessarily my family. My family kind of let me do whatever I wanted to do, but because I hadn't gotten married, you know, I had to have a job. I had to have some way of supporting myself, and so.
And were you living by yourself during this time, or were you like living with your family still?
I think by that time I had moved out, but I didn't move out of my parents' house until I was in my 20s. But I told my mom, I was like, Mom, I've got some vacation. I'm going to take a 4-day weekend. I've rented a hotel in Fort Worth, you know, like 30 minutes away. I'm going to take my Xbox. It's Skyrim opening night. I'm going to go buy Skyrim. I'm going to go to the hotel, and I am going to play Skyrim uninterrupted for 4 straight days.
Oh my goodness. That is so awesome.
And because there was no way to play it uninterrupted, you know, there was always that sort of guilt hanging over your head. You know, it was like, Dad really wants me to get off this thing. You know, he doesn't really like it. It wasn't just the typical, like, she plays video games too much. It was, she plays video games, period. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So by being out from that, I could, you know, just completely relax, completely immerse myself in this game. And so that's what I did. But the funny part is, on Friday night, my mom, who's a very sweet, loving, timid, unassuming, careful person, calls me and she says, hi. And I was like, hi. And she's like, how's it going? I was like, well, I'm checked in. She's like, I really need to ask you something. I was like, sure. She's like, there's not like a guy there with you, is there? And I was like, no, Mom. I am a sad nerd who rented a hotel room so that I could play a video game. That is it.
That's pretty amazing. Just sitting in there in your hotel room, just zoning out on Skyrim for 4 days. Did you beat it in the 4 days, or did you like? Did it even
No, I'm a
matter?
completionist, so no, it was just about completely like exploring every little aspect and everything. I probably didn't get very far at all. I probably made like 7 characters. Just I love the character creation over and over again. I would go and do that.
I've probably played like Skyrim, multiple characters, 300 plus hours of that game, and I've never beat it.
Yeah,
I'm just, I'm totally fine with it too. I'm just like, that's a
yeah,
storyline I didn't have to do. Like, I don't care what's at the end of that. I've gotten everything I need to get out of Skyrim without beating it.
yeah.
Yeah.
Same. That's also how I play. I didn't like resurface for I think 4 months. I pretty much played that every chance I could get for a really long time. I needed that time too because that was about the time when I was leaving the church and I just wanted to zone out.
When did you know you needed to get out of this group and do your own thing?
Whenever I was in my seventh grade biology class, my professor or my teacher, I guess, was going, we were going over evolution. And I was like, yes, this makes sense. I can get behind this. And I just never believed in not God necessarily because I don't think they're mutually exclusive, but I never believed in the creation story after that.
Very
And
good.
I spent a lot of agonizing moments trying to make myself believe it.
So you came to the light through science.
Yes, that's really what it comes down to.
Yeah. Yeah, but you kind of like got out of this relationship with your family and kind of broke away from them later in your life too, didn't you?
Yeah, it took a while because in this church, I really, it was a cult, but not in like the physically dangerous way that a lot of people associate with cults. But it was a cult in that it was very difficult to leave, and women were very much controlled and all in sort of a social way. The girls would get married super young and they would have no idea who they were as an individual or how to, they didn't have jobs, they didn't go to college. So they were very limited as to even have any kind of resources or connections to do anything outside of the church. But on top of that, the big fear was that if I left, since so many of these people were my family, my aunts and uncles, my grandparents, my cousins, would they, basically disown me? And would I even get to have a relationship with them anymore? And so that fear kept me in this church until I was into my 20s, and my dad gave me the opportunity to actually go to college because unlike all these other girls, I did not get married. I figured there must be something horribly wrong with me, and now I just know it's because guys in that atmosphere wanted women that were malleable and that would do what they wanted them to do and who didn't um, try to think for themselves or read a lot of books or open themselves up to the outside culture. uh, and that wasn't me. And so I wasn't marriage material, thank goodness.
And so when you say how young, how young do you mean?
um, Not illegal, but a lot of my peers, like I had probably about 15 girls my age. None of them, um, they're all very close friends, and most of them got married between the ages of 17 and 20.
17, 20.
Quite a few of them 17.
Did you
So
so
two guys of more or less the same age, but still.
so you are you still close with your family at all? Did you get to stay with them, keep in touch with them, or did you have a total falling out because you left the church?
I got lucky. I was able to leave, and by that time, I think my family had kind of come to maybe respect the way that I thought and some of my ideas. And when I left and didn't fall off the deep end and become like a scarlet woman and, or I don't know what they really expected. But when I just started leading a normal life, my family started following me out. And there was some other things going on in the church at the time too, and I definitely can't take total credit for it. But eventually, all my immediate family left the church as well, and we are all much better for it. And much happier for it as well.
So you were the kind of the person who broke your family out of the church? It sounds like you were the pathfinder there to finding
I
what
was
normal life looked
definitely,
like outside of
yeah,
this place.
I was definitely the first person in my family to even think about leaving, let alone actually leaving. So, yeah.
And are you actually normal? Are you normal, well adjusted?
I mean, no.
I mean, you are playing Dungeons and Dragons.
I've always been a nerd. I'm pretty sure that's another reason why none of those guys wanted to marry me.
Yeah. You're listening to the Danger Dungeon Encounter podcast. I'm your host, Dungeon Master Chase. We're talking to Adrianne Skelton, the owner of Touchstone Dice. I've heard a joke before that there's 3 types of dice collectors in the world. There are halflings who forget to even bring their dice to the game and have to borrow some. There are high elves, which just need a few pairs of very nice dice. And then there are goblins who just think they just need all the dice they need. Just bring them more. Have them hoard their dice. But do any of those, what exactly are you as a dice business person now?
I'm a business goblin.
You're a business.
I got into the dice business so I could buy all the dice anytime I wanted to.
Before you got into the business, did you just have a dice collection that was spinning out of control? Were you going to be buried underneath your dice?
My Google Photos stream serves as a timeline of my dice obsession. If you go back to beginning of this year, I had about 10 sets of dice, and I thought that was a lot. I don't even know how many I have now.
Oh, you
Hundreds.
Know, like my sweet summer child.
and most of them are, inventory, quote unquote.
Do you ever skim the inventory? Do you ever just take off the top?
Yeah.
Like be like, I'm gonna take these with me now.
I mean, I keep sets together and stuff, but yeah, I mean, I do have a collection, but it's a very short list because if I let myself go, I would keep all the dice. I would keep all the dice.
You are a goblin. You are a dice goblin. How did you decide to start a business?
Well, that was really it. It was a combination of 2 things. First of all, if I had a business that sold dice, I could buy dice all the time, as much as I wanted to. Any dice I saw, I could buy, and under that umbrella, under that excuse, hold them for a little while, give them some admiration, show them to my friends, and then release them back into the wild without being out any money, or maybe even making a profit. The other side of that was when I started realizing how deep the dice collecting hobby goes. I found these people, like countless people on Instagram, who are hand making dice, beautiful creations. It's totally art. And when I saw that, I was like, I have found my calling. I can do that. And apparently I have a really good eye for these old collectible dice that people will pay a disgusting amount of money for. And at first I thought I was lucky because I was finding dice that were super, super resellable, in high demand, and very rare and very expensive. I was finding them daily. And then after about 2 months of this passed, I realized that it had to be a little bit of combination of skill and luck because I can find them. I'm just good at it. I don't know why. I really couldn't tell you why.
What are some of the things that can make dice rare or more valuable?
The big one, and the one that hooked me and pulled me in, is Chessex. Chessex Dice has been around for a while. They're a German company. And back about 15 years ago, that's the other thing. All this collectible stuff, it doesn't go back much farther than 15 years ago, which is, I think, unusual for a collecting hobby. A lot of things that make, like, say, coins or stamps very valuable is how old they are. With dice, it's different. But back to Chessex, they made a holographic glitter that they put into their Borealis line. In 2001, Chessex started making a Borealis line. They started with about 5 different colors, a couple more than that, actually. They made a Quirple. They made royal purple, sky blue. A lot of these Borealis lines got released in 2001, and they made them all with a holographic glitter. Then, after a certain amount of time, about 4 to 6 years ago, they ran out of that glitter. And the big kicker is they were unable to purchase anymore because in that time, the government of Germany had started using that specific holographic material in their currency. And the glitter had become a controlled substance. And they were not, it would be illegal for them to obtain more or buy any more. And so they started making that same Borealis line with a different type of glitter. They didn't change the name and they didn't change anything about the dice at all except for the glitter. But if you dive into this crazy dice collecting hobby, it will not be long before you start seeing pictures of these colors side by side. So say purple Borealis. It's called purple with white because the white is on the numbers or the pips. If you put a purple Borealis die from more than 6 years ago next to one that you could walk into your local game store today and buy, you can see the difference. One looks like a galaxy. The glitter just has this suspension that is amazing, and the new ones are pretty, but it's just like a solid gold glitter, not really anything special about it. And this is characteristic of all of these.
Is there anything else that makes dice, like certain rare sets of dice, or is it mostly this Borealis thing?
It's a big name in collecting because of the fact that it was made with what is now a controlled substance. But there is a whole lot of other things that can contribute to making dice valuable. So just rarity, things that are out of print is the next category that you would look at. Chessex, again, is a big one here because they've been making dice almost the longest. Definitely the biggest company to be making dice the longest. And so a lot of their colors and designs that they have discontinued are valuable. They're out of print. The older they are in that case, the more valuable they are typically.
Have you ever seen a set of dice just suddenly jump in price? What made them jump?
I think a lot of it is just there's so many new people coming into D&D now. And so these Borealis dice, for instance, or other discontinued sets are beautiful and unique. So people would come in and they would suddenly realize that these things exist. And then you see them. If you like dice at all, you're like, I have to have these. I must have them. And so I think with so many new people coming into the hobby, the D&D hobby, you get an influx of people coming into the dice hobby. And then all of a sudden there's a whole lot more money in the game and people with a whole lot more money to spend. And so you go from having a Borealis set that sold at the beginning of this year for maybe $60-$70 that is now going, getting close to $200 a set on eBay.
So are beautiful dice, are they just the jewelry of tabletop role playing?
To me, yes. I mean, there's definitely like an aesthetic that that I like, or different ones that just really grab me just for the pure art of it. But what makes it kind of transcend jewelry to me, and then I can't really speak to jewelry because I'm not a huge jewelry person, but what makes it even more captivating to me is I really like to create like palettes and mixing different dice together, or just find those perfect 3 sets that seem to fit my character that I'm playing. It's just fascinating to me. I could do it endlessly, and now I get paid to do it endlessly.
Have you ever seen a set of dice drop in price?
I think I will. I haven't been doing this that long to see the ups and downs, but I feel like that this whole thing, honestly, is a bubble, and that the market's going to get kind of saturated, and Also, the thing about out of print sets or discontinued sets is there's a finite number of them, and there is a lot of people in this collection, in this hobby now, and I feel like at some point people are just going to be spent. Um, for actually seeing the price of something drop, I'll go back to Kraken. For a while there, people were just sure that all these sets were going to never come back, and so people were paying, $50 to $100 for sets that were out of print because they wanted them right then and didn't really care if they ever came back or they thought they might not. And then Kraken printed them again, and you can go to their website, buy them for $15. At that point, a lot of the prices on them drop.
So yeah, I think that's like an interesting point that you brought up, is like there was a finite amount of rare dice. So after you like get out of the rare business, the big thing is like curated dice and just like dice that are better. So what's like the advantage of going through someone like you who's like an artisan curated dice person versus just going to a normal hobby shop or a bookstore that happens to also sell dice?
A lot of people buy dice online. A lot of my customers initially were international and don't maybe have access to these sets other than online. But a good example is like Cheswick's line of Vortex dice. They have quite a few different colors in the Vortex line, which is like a translucent dice that has a swirl of a couple of different colors in it. And they have a tendency to get really muddy as they're produced. So if you buy a set off, online, you could get it in, and it could just be a really muddy set of dice, and it doesn't really look that great. Whereas if you go to a local game store, and they have bins of dice, you go through them and pick out, hand pick these really clear, windowy, swirled vortex dice with all the right colors and kind of match them all together. People will pay quite a bit more because it saves them money in the long run. They don't have to buy 5 sets of dice and throw out, half of them. I do some of that. I do a lot of re-inking to match sets together and make them look more cohesive, because a lot of the ink colors that are available through regular manufacturers are just your basic metallics, white or black. And people are wanting a little bit more than that now. I would say, I haven't done any polls or anything, but I would say that way over half of my customers are women. They are bringing with that the the inhibition of liking things that are pretty. Guys aren't supposed to like things that are sparkly or rainbow or bright colors. They're not supposed to really like those things. So a lot of the marketing to that group of D&D players has left out those things. And now all of these women or people in the LGBT community are coming in, and they're not afraid of that stuff. In fact, they want it, and they want more of it.
And I mean, that's the thing that you do, like, especially on your Instagram, like you just take beautiful pictures of dice. And so do you think that's what it is? It's these new groups into the hobby that just really like beautiful, aesthetically pleasing things, like these beautiful pictures of dice that you're taking?
Yeah, I really try. So thank you for that. I try to take pretty pictures. There's a hashtag for it, hashtag dice porn. It's a thing. And I always thought that was kind of funny, but I started tagging them like that, and that's what a lot of people like. A lot of people also kind of like the ASMR aspect of videos of dice. The click sound that dice make as they click together is very satisfying and relaxing to a lot of people.
So for people who don't know what that acronym means, what does that acronym mean, that ASMR?
It is Autonomous Sensory Meridian Response.
So, and that's just like when like you hear something like the sound of dice falling on the table and rolling and stuff like that. And that's a cool thing. And like these virtual tabletops, like they they do these things. Like they throw them in. Like Roll20 has this sound of dice falling on the table. Magic Arena now has the sound of packs cracking when you open packs. That
Oh, cool.
the sound.
Yeah.
Something weird for me on Magic cards, and they've recently changed the printing, so it's not there anymore. But when I open up packs of Magic cards, is like the smell of the glue of the older cards was super nostalgia for me. And the older sets, even growing up, like when I was a young guy getting into collectible card games and the hobby things, like it's super, as soon as I smell that smell, it brings me back to like that, like being 12 and being in a comic book shop as a little kid.
That's interesting. I wonder if there'd be a way to harness smell into dice, because smell is like that. It's like such a strong memory tie.
Do you think the future of dice are strawberry scented?
Oh, I'm sure. I mean, at this point, the sky's the limit. People are coming up with amazing things every day. In fact, I bet you somebody's already done it.
I bet it's already done. I recently saw some different dice that you were doing. Some of them look like watermelon. Some of them look like ice cream cones and stuff like that.
The watermelon is super cool. They've taken a marbleized green color and then layered like a pearly white, just tiny line on top of that, and then the rest of the die is a translucent red with little black flecks of glitter in it, and it's just amazing. It looks like little slices of watermelon.
Forbidden snacks.
Yes, there's that too. That's a whole other thing. A lot of people, I think, they're in this community anyway, their draw to dice is that it looks like stuff that you could eat.
Yeah. And so with people making dice now more, you're getting like these small companies that are making dice. Is there a way that the average person can tell if a dice is well balanced or loaded at their table?
That's a good question. And before I got into dice, I would have said, well, if it's a dice from one of the well-known manufacturers, then you're probably good. But since then, since I've done a lot with Chessex speckled dice, I've actually found out that a lot of their dice are not balanced. So at the same time, I've yet to, like, if the hundreds of dice sets that I haven't rolled them all, but I've rolled a lot of them. I've yet to find any that are just super heavily weighted one way or the other, unless they're intended to be. So if they're intended to be, it's pretty obvious. Like they sell them as cheat dice, etc. So.
And so, like, if someone thinks that someone at their table is using loaded dice, how can they tell that?
You could do something called a saltwater test, but I'm not sure if that's something that you would have readily available. It's not too hard. You just you get some water and you saturate it with salt. Once you've kind of reached that saturation level where it's no longer absorbing the salt, you have very salty water. And if you drop a die into it and let it free float or kind of give it a spin with your finger, if it is fairly balanced, it will it will come up with a 20 on top, and the next time with a 2, and the next time with 14, and just random. But if it's unbalanced, then it will keep coming back to the same number or the same group of numbers.
Have you ever put your dice in dice jail because they're rolling bad?
I'm not superstitious about dice yet, and I say that really hesitantly because it's growing on me. Because I think the more that I play D&D in person where I'm rolling physical dice, the more superstitious I'm going to get about the dice that I'm using. Like that incredible moment from a couple of weeks ago when my character didn't die because I rolled my most special dice in the world to me, and it barely saved my life, like with an 11. That die, I admit that I'm so superstitious about that die now, I'm afraid to roll it again because I don't want to be proven wrong.
So what makes like that one dice like so special, your Orange Borealis?
Orange Borealis is one of the original colors that Chessex made in that line. There's what I call the Big Six, which is there's 3 different clear ones, which are called a Corporal Clear and Confetti. And then there's 3 colored ones, which are red, green, and orange. Orange is just beautiful. It looks like a mote of sunlight. It's And it's also fairly rare because it was the least popular of those colors when they were initially released, and so not a lot of people bought it. But yeah, it's just gorgeous. And then the other one is confetti, which is like a clear, translucent dye with multicolored glitter.
So the orange is the black sheep of the Borealis series.
Yeah. And now people, like people will sell their souls for a piece of orange. And in my first week of dice collecting, I found 3.
What do those go for?
If I ended up trading 2 of them actually, which is the community I'm part of is big into dice trading. No one can afford to drop, hundreds of dollars on a single die very often, if at all. And so trading is a big deal. But I ended up trading 2 of those away, a D10 and a D%, for multiple other old glitter D20 Borealis dice in all different colors. So now I have almost all of them. And then the orange pieces, if I were to sell them, would have gone for $300 each. The D20 that I own and am never getting rid of, and that saved my life, etc., is kind of like probably $500 ish for one die. But that's a real flexible number because it seems to be growing daily.
Wow.
With how much people pay for it. Like a month ago, I would have said $300, but now it would go for a lot more than that on an auction on eBay.
So where do you find these lots of dice so that you can find these rare dice?
I could tell you, Chase, but then I'd have to kill you.
Oh, so that's like a trade secret?
Sort of. I mean, I spend a lot of time on the internet. I spend a lot of time thinking about where these things could exist in the world and tracking them down. And then I also spend a lot of time in the real world. My daughter and I took a vacation to Austin, and I went to every single game store in Austin and looked through their dice. Not super profitable. A lot of those trips aren't as profitable. You just kind of get lucky. But I still love doing it. It's a lot of fun.
Have you found any valuable dice in like strange places, like garage sales or random people sending it off, or anything like that?
Where I found these orange Borealis was pretty lucky. In a classified ad online, somebody had was doing an estate sale, and their uncle had passed away, and they lived close to Gen Con. The area. Their uncle was a big D&D fan and had been collecting dice for a long time. And I just bought all her dice. It was like a cubic square foot, I think, if not more, of dice. And a lot of my obsession started with that one purchase.
How long did it take you to get all the way through all that dice? Like that cubic foot. How many days did that take you just to like sort all that?
Not really that long. A lot of them were old pound of dice mix speckleds.
Really?
And they're a lot of fun. Like old pound of dice is awesome. I love it. It's better than the current ones that are out there. There's a lot of really neat color combos in there. There's a lot of like purples and pinks and like confetti, or not confetti, funfetti. Like, birthday cake looking speckled dice. And so I had a lot of fun. But, probably about 60-70% of them were the pounded dice speckled. So it was easy just to shove all those to the side and focus on the last, 30%. And that didn't actually take me very long.
So you recolor dice. I never knew that people did this, but like the numbers inside of the dice, you actually recolor those, don't you?
Yes, I do a lot of re-inks. I started doing it with those same pounded die speckleds because a lot of those beautiful pinks and creams and birthday cake sprinkle dice were inked in black, and it just messed up the entire aesthetic. So I re-inked them to kind of coordinate the sets together, like take a bunch of different colors. And I call them sugar stones, and I know my customer base, and I was right. People kind of went nuts over them.
So do you do that with a brush, or is that with like a pen, or how do you do that? Because that's so small.
A lot of people do it with the pen. I have a ton of paints and brushes because I'm an artist and have been for forever. So I just used what I had on hand, and after some testing and everything, it worked really well. So yeah, I use a brush, but it's not unless you're re-inking dice that have a texture or if they are translucent. You It's really not difficult to do. You just gob a bunch of paint on the number, make sure it's kind of filled into the cracks, and then wipe it off. And the paint stays in the recess of the number.
So you don't have to
And
use paint remover or anything to take away the original color?
not if you're using the right kind of paint.
And what kind of paint do you use?
I just use acrylic paint, but I use a higher quality. And the key is patience. You just have to brush on the paint and then immediately, like just with my thumb, I'll brush and then immediately wipe off the excess with my thumb, which leaves sort of a smear on the die face. And then I'll just do the entire die like that and then sit it down and let it sit for acrylic paint does not take long to dry, maybe 10 minutes, but to kind of cure and set takes a little longer. So I let it sit for like 20, 25 minutes and then just go back with a microfiber cloth and buff off the smears of paint on the faces, and it's done.
And so you got into recently like making your own dice with like molds and stuff like that. How'd you get into that?
Mostly, that was what inspired me. Like as soon as I saw that you could do that and that it wasn't that difficult, I was like, this is what I want to do. I want to make dice. And I was at the same time starting to buy way more dice than I needed and kind of getting into dice collecting. And I thought, you know what? I can find these dice. They're in high demand. I seem to be good at it. I'm going to sell these collectible dice. I'm going to sell dice that I think people will buy, whether they're out of print or not. And in the process, fund my business of what I hope to do, which is to make my own dice handmade and hopefully eventually like actually have my own dice produced. I would like to go from just making handmade sets to designing my own dice and having them produced by a factory and actually starting my own dice making business.
And so when you make your dice, what do you make them out of?
Epoxy resin is what I use. You take a die that you want to copy. If you're doing this for your own personal use, then obviously you can use any die that you like. If you're doing it for commercial use, then things are proprietary, just like anything else. That actually stumped me for a little while. I was like, why? These are polyhedral shapes. Why are they proprietary? And eventually I realized that it's because of the fonts. And for some specific types of dice or combinations, they're very recognizable, like, say, game science dice are very recognizable. If you were to mold those and start selling them, they would probably come after you because it's very obvious you've copied their work, and that is unethical, if not illegal. So, but yeah, you just take a die that you like, you make a silicone mold with it, pop out the die. Now you've got a silicone mold, and you fill that mold with epoxy, and you let it cure, and then you can pop it out and paint the numbers, and you're good. That's the very simple version. There's a whole bunch of different types of molds: open face, sprue, squish. There's a whole bunch of different types of materials that you can use for both the molds, or you can use different types of resin. There's UV resin, which cures underneath a UV light, kind of like some of the stuff that they use in, say, like nail salons. Those are really interesting. There's resin that dries a solid white color. There's resin that dries clear, and you can put all kinds of things in it. Yeah, it just goes on and on.
So outside of yourself, who do you think's making? What company do you think's making the best dice right now?
I love Chessex because they're, I don't know, there's just something about just, I think it's familiarity to me, and they are very good quality dice. The new A smaller company that everybody loves is Kraken, and I agree. They make really pretty dice, and they do a couple of innovative things, like you get two D20s in a set and three extra D6, which is fun because that way you've got stuff you can roll with advantage. All right, and then as far as handmade, on Instagram there are a ton, but a couple of my favorites. First is Dispel Dice. They haven't even started selling their dice yet, but they have the most gorgeous pictures of dice on the planet. Like, I do not know how they do it. If I was guessing, I would say they probably have a background in jewelry or something, because the pictures that they take are just phenomenal, and the dice themselves are gorgeous. And then another favorite is actually here local in Texas, and I got to meet her and buy some sets from her at Acon in Dallas a couple weeks back. She's Fresh Hell Studio. The thing about these handmade sets is there's such a demand, even though there's a ton of them. As soon as they upload their sets to their shops, they're sold out within half an hour, if that.
Oh, wow.
Even though there's literally hundreds of these people, if they make good dice, those dice are just not meeting the demand. With Fresh Hell Studio, as much as I loved her dice, there was no way I could ever get my hands on any, because they would be selling out, in minutes. So when I heard she was going to be at Acon, I bought a ticket just to go and buy dice from her. At the convention, they have sets that they've, tried to build up a stock with. And so I was able to go, and I bought 3 different sets of dice from her. And the 2 of them, oh my gosh, they are the most beautiful dice in the world. And I immediately adopted them for Iris, my warlock, and now those are the dice that she rolls.
Did she give you any advice about being in the dice business?
Yes, she told me the very first thing I needed to do was buy a pressure pot, and she's not wrong. She's been making dice, or she's been working with resin for 9 years, so I listened very carefully to everything she told me.
And so you're about to open your website, aren't you?
Yes, I'm going to be launching my web store on Friday. So I'll go from just selling stuff off of Instagram through pictures and with PayPal to actually having a website with my own domain and a shopping cart and everything, which a lot of people are really excited about, because they can just go and pick and choose all these single out of print dice that they've been looking for, exactly what they want, just a die here, a die there, and check out, and just pay shipping once, that kind of thing. Kind of like the online version of rummaging through bins of dice at a local game store.
So where can people find you online? What are your tags on Instagram? And what's going to be the domain for your new website that's coming out?
You can find me at touchstone_dice on Instagram. And whenever I launch my web store on Friday, my site will go live, and that is simply www.touchstonedice.com.
Thank you so much for being on the show. This was very informative. Taught me a ton of stuff about dice that I had no idea before talking to you about. So thank you so much. And we're hoping that your business, when you take off on Friday and everyone starts checking it out, does super well.
Me too. I just only wish that I had enough for everyone. That's the hardest part.
I think someday you might actually have enough for everyone, especially if everything keeps on coming right and you do eventually get to open up your own business.
That's the purpose. That's the goal. So thank you.
If you like content like this, coverage of all things tabletop role-playing games, interviews with game masters and creators, and game master advice, be sure and keep an eye on this channel. Till then, keep those dice rolling, and let's keep making this stuff up together on the fly.